Yeah, so let's talk about your Red Sox. What's going on with them? Why do you think the recent struggle has been for them? And I guess it's kind of been an inconsistency thing with them kind of all season. But they've had really good stretches of like really good baseball, and then now they're not playing so well.
Yeah, I think the most shocking thing talking about the Yankees is how quickly you could really say the whole AL has changed, but more specifically the AL East. And up until maybe a week ago, I was feeling confident that the Red Sox would get the second wild card spot. And I still do think that. I think it's going to be Yankees Red Sox for the wild card, which will be absolutely insane. But I think the A's have more flaws than the Red Sox do. And the main reason is something you mentioned with Chris Bassett out. And it's horrible to talk about this because we're lucky that he was able to walk off the field. We're lucky that he's okay with the severity of that injury. But with him not in that rotation, this pitching staff just looks so much weaker. And the Starling Marte acquisition has been huge for them.
Yes.
But besides him, it's Matt Olson. It's Olson and Marte in that lineup. And now it's Sean Manaea and Colt Irvin and, kind of question marks. So I think that the Red Sox have more talent to work with. And you could say that their pitching staff is also flawed. But now that they've shown glimpses, I always say it's the curse of the expectation. If you start out so strong like the Red Sox did, you start to instill some hope in people. And then to see them collapse the way they have over the past month has just been excruciating. And the easy answer in the past week is that they now have 7 high-quality players on the COVID IL list. They're one of the few teams in baseball that's under the 85% vaccination threshold. There's been a whole conversation about it. I'm sure you're very up to date with it. But it's frustrating to see high-quality players go down, and that's exactly what happened. They're starting infield tonight against the Rays, the best team in the AL, arguably in baseball. Their middle infielders are Jonathan Arauz and Jack Lopez.
Ooh.
That's not exactly. That's not going to win a lot of games. So it's frustrating to see that. I'm hoping that this often comes up. The other thing that has been really frustrating is how bad they've been on defense. They just have been making elementary school-like mistakes. Chris Sale is back. I think that is a huge anchor. You can still rely on just the talent that JD Martinez has and Rafael Devers has and Xander Bogaerts has. So that's why I'm still confident. But at this point, we don't have that many games left. They've got to pull things together quickly. And that's why it was horrible. But when the Yankees were playing the A's, I was rooting for the Yankees. Because at this point, they're far ahead. I'd rather them solidify themselves in the wild card spot, and then the Red Sox can claw their way for the second spot.
I don't think I've ever heard a Red Sox fan saying they're cheering for the Yankees. I may have to edit that out and cut that out.
Desperate times.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I disagree, in the sense that I think Oakland will. In the end, I think they will prevail. I don't know. I just feel like they have a little bit of momentum now. And I think I'm high. Maybe I'm higher than you are on their pitching, but that whole Starling Marte acquisition for them, it's up there with like the Adames trade. It's up there with like all these bigger trades that he's maybe has had such a huge impact on them, like just stolen base wise. Like he goes up there, he steals a base. I heard this crazy stat. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I know at one point he was one of the NL leaders in stolen bases, and now he's one of the American League leaders in stolen bases. And I could be wrong.
No, he's gonna finish in the top 5 in both leagues in stolen bases.
And that's wild. Insane. So, and that completely changes the dynamic of Oakland because they've never been a running team. But that's neither here nor there. But I think the Red Sox and the Yankees would be a phenomenal World Series. I think ratings wise, I think Manfred would just have like that's his dream scenario. I don't know if that's going to happen. But talk to me about Chris Sale. Like how has he looked? I haven't seen his recent start. Does he look like his Cy Young self?
Yes, he does. And I didn't expect it to be that high. His first 3 opponents were Baltimore, Minnesota, and Texas, I believe. So obviously no playoff contenders there. As we record, he's pitching against the Rays now, and he gave up a 2-run homer. I don't have the score up in front of me, but it was 2-1 when I left. So hopefully it's still relatively calm. The biggest thing,
still 2-1.
Okay, phew. The biggest thing recovering from Tommy John is always command. And his command is impeccable. His velocity is slowly starting to inch its way up. I think in his first start, he was right around 95, which is okay. And he's already hitting 96, 97. So that's huge. But what's way more important is that slider is there. And it's the wipeout slider that it was in 2018 when he finished out the season for the World Series champs. So that was huge. Again, now he's starting to get the real test. He's going to pitch against Tampa. He's going to pitch against New York. He's going to pitch against Chicago. The Red Sox don't have an easy stretch to end, which is obviously another reason why it's going to be tough for them to get the wild card. Oakland does too. But I think, I was saying worst case scenario, this is almost turning into a New York Mets Jacob deGrom situation. He just needs run support. And again, Jack Lopez isn't going to be able to give Chris Sale the run support that he needs and deserves. So that offense has been there all season. It needs to stay there. And now you have the ace. It makes such an unquantifiable impact when Chris Sale can be the ace, and then there's less pressure on Nathan Eovaldi, which means there's less pressure on Eduardo Rodriguez and Nick Pivetta. And you can go down the list. He can also go deeper in games because the Red Sox have a bullpen problem. So it solves so many of their issues that had been popping up all season long.
No, for sure. And he has always been one of those pitchers that has been fun to watch. And just looking at his body type is really lanky, tall, it's the way he throws. I've always, especially when he was on the White Sox, I saw him a lot more when I was in California, because obviously the White Sox and Oakland, they play each other more often than not. So, but yeah, that completely changes you guys' rotation, having him there. Do you think he would start a wild card game, or would they still go Nathan Eovaldi?
That's a good question. I actually think his next few starts will be really important because Alex Cora and Chaim Bloom made the conscious decision to let him get the quote-unquote non-competitive starts at the beginning so that he didn't have to be thrown into the fire at the Trop and start his first game in the season against, as I said, the best team in the AL. So I think that was an excellent decision. I think if it comes down to it, how can you not? As good as Eovaldi has been, Sale's the guy. And I was talking about this the other day. I can't remember with who. Even if the Yankees go into the wild card with as much momentum as they have now, Garrett Cole versus Chris Sale in a wild card game, I don't think you can automatically give that to the Yankees. That's going to be a really serious pitching battle.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And my thoughts on the wild card kind of fluctuates with every season. I feel like the first year I hated it. Second year I'm like, this is crazy. And it doesn't help that Oakland, whenever they get to the wild card, they have not been able to win.
I know.
14, they had that just absolutely just stupid game against the Royals and had the lead 3 times and was not able to do it. I think they stole like 6 or 7 bases on Oakland. And and then after that, Billy Beane did his thing and traded everybody.
Yeah.
But and then against the Yankees and against the Tampa Bay Rays. So I think, like I said, my thoughts kind of fluctuate how I feel on the wild card, but you can't deny that it's just so much pressure. It's a huge excitement. Instant Game 7. The Brewers had their bad luck with the wild card in 2019 when the Nationals played them.
That game. Yeah.
And it's just another like a dumb error, and it's just Hader he blew the lead. So it's really frustrating, especially since it's you win, you're in. If you lose, you're out, and your whole season's over in one game, which is not very baseball like.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'm thinking eventually they'll change that. I'm assuming they would. Last year, I loved the whole format. I thought there were too many teams. I would have gotten rid of 2 of them. But I like that format, a 3-game wild card, which is more like baseball, right? Yeah. So it is what it.
100% agree. I didn't like the extra teams, but I think at this point it's got to be a 3-game series. It's unbaseball to do that, and especially for a team like Oakland. Moneyball is one of my favorite books, and the whole narrative about that is you can't show everything that has gone onto the season in one game. All of your talents can't be encompassed in one game. So I definitely think it should be a 3-game set. And at this point, NL wild card could be a 1-game set between the Dodgers and the Reds, or the Dodgers and the Padres, and that would be a disservice. If it's Yankees Red Sox, that would be a disservice. I think you've got to put it in a 3-game series.
Yeah. Speaking of the National League wild card, the Brewers are in such a good spot because they will probably play Atlanta the way it is, unless Philly does something crazy, but it's probably going to be Atlanta, and they've been playing really well. And then the wild card is going to be either the Padres and the Dodgers, or the Dodgers and the Reds, and then whoever wins that series flies to San Francisco and plays them. So the Brewers only have to see one of those teams, and their path to the World Series is incredible. It's incredibly easier than maybe the Giants, who have to play either the Dodgers or the Reds. And the Reds, no slouch. Like, I mean, they have their issues with the bullpen, but like they have some really like explosive offensive players. So I think.
Yeah, no, finish your point. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, so I think the Brewers are really well positioned in the National League to see whoever comes out of that series.
I totally agree. Pat and I have been talking for a while about how good the matchup would be between the Brewers' big three pitching and the Reds' offense, because that's some serious firepower. I mean, at this point, the team that wins the NL West might actually have the hardest road to the World Series, which is you probably couldn't have predicted that at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I was kind of likened it to the Bucks, how they had to play the 76ers in round 2. When that should have been like to get to the finals. Yeah. But that was the round 2, and then after that they had to play I can't even remember.
Right? I think the Nets was the
Sorry. They didn't have to play the 76ers. They played the Nets. No, that wasn't the Eastern Conference Finals. They had to play the Atlanta Hawks.
Oh yeah. That was a tough road. Yeah.
Yeah, so they had to go Miami, Brooklyn, then Atlanta, and I'm like, man, these guys, they're being tested every single series. And I think that's going to be how whoever wins the NL West is going to be the same thing, because they're going to have to face all these really, really good teams. And then out of that, they're going to have to go see the Brewers if they get past Atlanta, which I'm sure they will. And Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and Freddie Peralta, like that's a 1-2-3 that nobody wants to see. And maybe only the Dodgers have a better starting rotation for a postseason, unless you think of another team, but I don't think there's really many teams that can go toe to toe 1-2-3, and then even our 4th and 5th starters are actually picking it up this season as well. So it's going to be the National League. I think it's going to be so exciting to see how that all shapes out.
Yeah, I'm so excited, but I'm concerned that you're not afraid of the Braves at all, because I think they're super legit.
I'm concerned, but I'm not as concerned. Like, I'm not overlooking them, because yes, they are. And like I was just listening to your last podcast, and you're talking about how the infield is one of the, I think 30 home runs they all may have.
Yeah.
And that's great. But pitching, their pitching doesn't scare me as much as it would have pre-injuries, and also their best player is out for the season. So, but no, you're right. Like, the way, I think it's crazy how Atlanta and New York were both pretty much like seemed like their seasons were over, and both GMs were like, no, we're going to regroup, and we're going to, at the trade deadline, we're going to redo half our team.
Yeah. And
now they're both in the playoff race. So that's incredible, as because some teams would just be they fold, they say, okay, next year we'll do it, this isn't our year. But both of those teams took a gamble, and it's paid off like incredibly.
Oh yeah, and that the Braves especially had no business doing that after losing Acuna. And the Phillies stick around; they're so scrappy. I don't think they go on a run either. But yeah, it's pretty insane. And I also agree about the Braves pitching staff. They don't really have much of a bullpen either. But I don't know. There's something to be said for Freeman in the postseason. Even Ian Anderson as a rookie last year was so good in the postseason. So they might mix things up, but I completely agree that the Braves had the best 1-2-3 in baseball, far and away.
The Braves.
I'm sorry, the Brewers pitching staff.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say, wait, what? Hold up. No, yes, I completely agree, and I think it's gonna be fun. Like I to face the Dodgers, although part of me is like, maybe let's try to find a way to avoid the Dodgers. But
Yeah.
just that matchup pitching wise, and to see how they go against, and we already faced the Dodgers. I think the first time we took 2 out of 3, we swept Padres, and we're winning 2 of 4 from the Giants now. The first series, a lot of our players were on COVID, it was similar to how the Red Sox are now. We weren't really throwing out like our A+ relievers. We weren't throwing out our A+ lineup and stuff like that. So now that both teams are fully healthy, and you got to give San Francisco a ton of credit. Holy moly, like having a resurgence career or season from Buster Posey and Brandon Belt and Crawford, who's could be MVP conversation. It's insane how they went from just being middle of the pack in the National League till now they're the best team. And I know there's talks about like their manager getting fired, or did they make a mistake in hiring him and all that, and now he might win Manager of the Year. And I think he should win Manager of the Year, just kind of based on what he's done so far with this team.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I think saying they're middle of the pack was generous too. I think everybody predicted them to finish below the Diamondbacks, and now the Diamondbacks they don't even have 50 wins on the season. I don't think. Yeah, it's crazy.
Diamondbacks are a whole nother
thing, a conversation for another time. But the Giants are one of my favorite things to talk about on this entire season. All these, I mean, you could literally go down the list. You could talk about the pitching. You could talk about Gausman. You could talk about DeSclafani. You could talk about Jake McGee, who's one of the best closers in baseball that nobody's talking about. And then everybody in that lineup who's turned back the clock. And again, I keep saying it. This was their last year before they were wiping it clean financially and starting up with Joey Bart, who's one of the best catching prospects in the game. So this was house money, and they went out and made themselves one of the best teams in baseball. Pat and I were talking about it on the episode that dropped on Wednesday. He said, do you think the MVP should be the best player on the best team in baseball? And I thought he was talking about Max Muncy, and he was talking about Brandon Crawford. So for the Giants and the Dodgers to be that indiscernible in a statement is pretty incredible.
Yeah, Brandon Crawford got an extension, which is insane because, like you said, this. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But this season, I think, or this offseason, they're having a ton of these contracts off the books, and they were looking at making some splashy moves. Buster Posey, 34 years old, Belt, 33 years old, Brandon Crawford, 34 years old. I mean, even Wilmer Flores, he's gonna be 30. So it's not a young team, and this is their core is still minus Madison Bumgarner and some of their relief pitching, but it's some of the same players who were in the 2010, 12, and 14 World Series. So they have that experience. I was telling somebody this: there's 2 teams that I think if they get to the postseason, which they both will, they can win this whole thing just based on when they get to the postseason, they always do really well. And that's the Astros. As much as I hate and pains me to say that, they're just really good. They hit, they don't strike out. They have really good pitching. And their players, their star players really show up in the postseason. If you look at last season, they were under 500. They get to the postseason and they're almost in the World Series. Yep. And then the Giants are the same way. I feel like once they get in, I feel like they'd always win, and that's I hopefully this season that doesn't happen
for both of us. I'll never understand people that count the Astros out. Something in Jose Altuve just clicks when it gets to October, and he turns into an entirely different beast. And Buster Posey, 34 years old, like you said, he's literally putting up his 2012 MVP numbers. It's absolutely insane to watch. And that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it before. That versus a team, what's an inexperienced team, like the White Sox. Who knows what these young players in the White Sox, how they're going to handle the pressure of the postseason. They've got Tony La Russa, who obviously knows his way around. Yeah. But it just doesn't stack up to somebody like Buster Posey, who's done it before, Crawford, who's done it before. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and they have, like I said, they have that experience. I was talking to Josh Nelson, I think, from the White Sox machine.
Yeah, we just had him on too.
Oh, nice. Really good guy. I had him on when the Brewers were playing the White Sox a couple weeks ago, not even a month ago now. And we were talking about how this could potentially be a World Series preview. And I had asked him because last season they played Oakland in the playoffs in the first round and they lost. And I said, do you think they really learned anything from that? Because the cliche, like, you got to lose before you win and all that stuff like that. And he said, I think the front office more so learned from their mistakes, just like because they did pitching wise, they had a couple just funky, weird decisions that they were making. So
yeah.
I think a team like that, where yes, they are inexperienced, and a lot of those players, they may not know what to do in the post, or not know what to do, but the moment may be too big for them, kind of thing.
Just a
San Francisco, it's just they're not. And even with the Brewers, they've been in the playoffs for 4 straight years. They were 1 game away from the World Series 3 years ago. I think, and a lot of the pitching staff were young, just breaking into the league at that year. So I'm really excited to see how they do. I think the Brewers, like I said, they have pitching wise, and Willy Adames and what he's been able to do. And then, I mean, if Christian Yelich starts becoming, and he's showing signs, if he starts playing the way he played in his MVP season in 18 and for most of 19 before he got hurt, like the Brewers, people may be sleeping on them a little bit on how good they can be in the postseason.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you. I think people are definitely sleeping on how dangerous the Brewers offense can be when fully healthy. I think everybody is respectfully hoping to not face the big 3. I can say that very confidently. But what I was going to ask you is, why is Yelich's turnaround so quiet? Why aren't more people talking about it? And then besides him, would you say that Yelich, Adames, and Narvaez are the big 3 on offense? Who else are you seeing production from in that lineup?
Okay, so in terms of Yelich, he's been injured for most of the season. I think he played like 60 or 70 games pre All-Star break. He didn't play much, and when he did come, like he had a really good defense still, and he was getting walks, but it wasn't really like intimidating any pitchers. They didn't have to pitch around him, and because of that, throughout the rest of the lineup, there just wasn't that protection in front of him and behind him. And we saw that the first couple months they really struggled offensively. Like there was games when they could barely scratch a run or two.
Right.
And it was like, this is the end of the world. And then obviously the Adames trade. And since then, like the Brewers have completely been a different team. Yeah. And that's why I said, like, talking about the National League MVP, like take him away from the Brewers and they're a under 500 team.
Yeah.
But put him back on the Brewers and they're an amazing team. And then offensively, Omar Narvaez, he's a really good catcher, all-star catcher. He doesn't have a ton of RBIs, but no one really on the Brewers has a ton of RBIs because they're not really dependent on one person. They're more of similar to like San Francisco. You were saying on your podcast how they're like a sum of their parts kind of thing. Similar to Milwaukee. They don't depend on one person, and it's mostly because Christian Yelich, who would have been that one person, hasn't been playing up to his standards. And why it's so quiet for him is because it's happened just honestly over the past couple of weeks since the All-Star break. He's been really picking it up. He's kind of getting his swagger back. He had a grand slam a couple weeks ago, a 2-homer game. Like he's kind of showing signs of life. Jackie Bradley Jr., who they signed from just completely just nothing at the plate.
He'll turn it around in the postseason, though. He always does.
I hope so. And if he does, legitimately, like no one's going to even care about his regular season. And that's the same thing I say about Yelich. Like he hasn't had a really good season. He has 41 RBIs, 8 home runs. But if he can go in the postseason and just really ball out, like we're gonna forget all about his the regular season, because the postseason, it's all that matters, really.
Right. One at bat can change everything.
Exactly. And it's always like a random person too who you don't think of who's gonna hit that home run.
Just quickly on Jackie Bradley too.
Yeah.
Everybody was screaming that Boston wasn't signing him back because he's been so good in the postseason, and he hits like 215 at every other part of his career. It's just 4 at bats in the ALCS, and he's suddenly heralded as this Boston slugger that we need to sign to a long-term deal. It was just so funny. His defense is obviously exceptional.
And that's why they signed him. But offensively,
it's so funny. Yeah, but it doesn't even matter because 1 at bat can literally change how people think about you, your reputation.
Yeah, and then Colton Wong has been really good. We got him from the division rival Cardinals, which really just makes it so much sweeter. At the top of the lineup, leading off, he does really well. He's had a couple injury stints, but nothing
As
dramatic.
everybody does.
Yeah. And then Willie Adames, like he's just been completely game changer. Avi Garcia, he's like sneaky one of the better right fielders in baseball right now. 77 RBIs, 24 home runs. They may not sign him. They may not be able to sign him next season just
24 homers. Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 24 home runs, 17 doubles, 77 RBIs, 7 stolen bases. So a little sneaky speed in there. But the Brewers don't really steal a ton of bases. It's never really been their MO, especially this season. But yeah, Luis Urias, utility guy who started off as their everyday third baseman, kind of became their everyday shortstop, then got replaced by Adames, became their like super utility guy, and he's just ran with it. Travis Shaw, another current Red Sox player, was at third base. He got injured pretty severely. He was out for a while. And so, yeah, I mean, like I think with the Brewers, it's just like we don't really depend on one person. It's just kind of that next man up, like, just get someone on and kind of, next at bat and just don't strike out a ton, although they do a lot. But recently they've been picking it up, and they can have random games where they'll score like 10 runs, and you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And then they'll have a game where they barely even scratch over a run or two. So it's up and down. And I think to me, that's probably they're just like, if they had one issue in the postseason, it's going to be, can they score enough runs against elite pitching? They're placing the Scherzers, the Sales of the world. They're going to have to face these elite pitching, and can they score runs? So that's, to me, that's their biggest issue. I am not concerned about the rotation as long as Freddie Peralta is healthy, and even if he isn't for the first series or two, like having Brennan Woodruff and Corbin Burns, like 1-2, like most teams don't. Yeah, most teams don't have 3 like 1A, 1B, 1Cs.
Yeah.
So I think that's, I'm not too concerned about how that's all shaping up. But
yeah,
in the bullpen, we have the best closer in baseball.
I was gonna say, you're so spoiled. Like, it doesn't even matter if you guys don't score any runs, because it's not like your pitching is gonna give up any runs. So it's funny. But the other thing too, I think it's just honestly astounding how common the next man up mantra has been. And maybe it's this year because we're coming off the 60-game shortened season, and we knew injuries were going to be so common this year. But look at the Yankees. Look what the Yankees have done. Look what the Braves have done. The Brewers, the Dodgers. It's just so funny. You don't see production from a guy like Yelich, and the Brewers are still a World Series favorite. Cody Bellinger has been below the Mendoza line for the majority of the season, and the Dodgers are just fine. Giancarlo Stanton.
I mean, the Dodgers, they have a ton of other talent, and they got one of the best, like, underrated shortstops in all of baseball as a throw-in the trade deadline.
Yeah, it's insane.
And like Turner is one of the best shortstops, and it's crazy how like little he was talked about, and for being as great as he is, the Dodgers. But I know what you mean for sure. Like it's. And the Brewers themselves, like they had Pablo Reyes play some games. They had Billy McKinney, who's not even on the team anymore, play some games. Manny Pena is a really good backup catcher. Daniel Vogelbach, who I think he may, I don't know if rosters expand today. I don't know if he's been called up officially, but I think he's joining the team sometime today, or I think he's already in San Francisco. Travis Shaw, of course, he's not here. Lorenzo Cain is one of the better defensive center fielders, and he hasn't really played a ton. He's missed some games with injuries. The Brewers have been like injury stricken all season, and they just have, like I said, the next man up, and that's how it's been. And then Jacob Nottingham was also another catcher on the team who's played some. Now he's not. Now he's gone. So it's been a wild ride, I would say, for every team, really, like that's competitive. The Yankees were up and down. The Red Sox, same thing with the Brewers, Oakland. I think maybe Tampa Bay's only been the real consistent, and maybe the White Sox too.
Yeah, well, the White Sox were without Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert for the majority of the season. Astros were without Bregman for a while. It just showed there's so much other talent that keeps them afloat.
Yeah, that's for sure. But yeah, so let's end on this. Tell me, looking at the league in general now, who do you think comes out of the National League? And you don't have to pander, you don't have to say the Brewers. I get it. Do you think it's going to be who do you think is going to be in the World Series?
Yeah, I really do think that the Brewers have the best complete pitching staff. I mean, they literally have a big three in the starting rotation and a big three in the bullpen. But the offense scares me a little bit. And unless Yelich becomes the 2019 version of himself when he was fully healthy, and that's the thing about back injuries too. It just seems like guys have such a hard time shaking those. Exactly, man. I do think so. Let's say I think the Giants are going to win the division. I'll lay it all out. I think the Giants are going to win the NL West. I think it's going to be the Dodgers and the Reds in the NL wild card. So it's going to be Giants, Dodgers, and I also agree that it's going to be Brewers, Braves. Mm-hmm. I think the Brewers win that. I think the Dodgers beat the Giants, and I think the Dodgers beat the Brewers. So the Dodgers come out of the West. The Dodgers the fact that they've revived Albert Pujols at this point in his career just shows how good they are on offense. And then AL, I think it's Red Sox, Yankees for the wild card. I have to say that they're going to win, obviously.
All right.
I think they do lose to the Rays, though. I think the Rays are too good. And then White Sox, Astros, I think is going to be potentially one of the best matchups of the entire postseason. I think that is so good. The White Sox have some injury concerns. Today, Lynn, Anderson, and Giolito all hit the IL. I actually don't think Giolito's on the IL, but he's going to miss a start. So that's huge.
Was nothing it COVID related or was it like arm related though?
Anderson pulled a hammy. Giolito was arm, and then I saw Lynn was right knee. I didn't look into that any further, but that seems kind of odd for him. But obviously, they're nothing without those guys. I think if I had to, I would go White Sox because I think they have the better pitching staff than the Astros. That's the one thing. I don't know if I want to put the ball in Jake Odorizzi's hand in a must-win game for Houston. Mm-hmm. So then it's Tampa Bay, Chicago. Oh man, I don't know.
It's gonna be fun. I'm so excited, and the season has gone so quickly.
It has.
It's insane how fast it's just gone. And I think it's going to be really fun. I can't wait for the postseason. I love baseball postseason.
Me too.
And I hate that sometimes the hours are like so funky. Like it's during the day. Like that stuff is the only thing that really like irritates me. But that's of course baseball just being really stupid and failing to market their teams and and doing things like that. So
who do you have coming out of the NL?
Yeah. NL, I have the Brewers coming out of the NL. I think it's going to be Brewers, Dodgers. I think it goes to Game 7, and I think it's going to be Brandon Woodruff versus probably Buehler in a Game 7, and that's kind of repeated 2018. I don't know. I can't remember who pitched for the Giants or for the Dodgers that game, but I think it's going to be those two teams, and I got to say the Brewers come out from the AL. I think Oakland Yankees. I think Oakland loses in the wild card again because they can't ever seem. They're not built for a one game thing.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, no team is built for a one game.
Yeah, no. I mean, maybe the Astros and
the Yankees, honestly.
Yankees, yeah, because they can just hit, And if it's in Yankee Stadium, like with their stupid little like wannabe right field, where like everything's just that's so frustrating. But yeah, so I think it's going to be Oakland. I think Yankees beat them, and I think it's going to be. I'm rolling with Astros. I think there's going to be Astros, and I think it's going to be Astros and Brewers. I'm not going to pick a winner.
Astros Dodgers. Astros.
See,
Dodgers.
Like the baseball fan in me wants that to happen so bad, but like I'm like, wow, the Brewer fan in me is like, no, screw that. Like I don't want them to, But I think anyway, no matter who's in, I think it's gonna be such like great theatrics. It's gonna be amazing.
It really is. And the funny thing too is that I can just as easily see a Game 7 between Burns and Woodruff, or Woodruff and Buehler, be a 1-0 affair, or I could just as easily see all these games having a score of 7-6 or 5-4 or something like that.
That's how the playoffs are sometimes.
Yeah, there's so much deviance, and I mean, I'm you and I can appreciate a good pitching battle. I don't think
absolutely
average baseball fans would love a 1-0 game, but to see talents like that, I mean, Burns, Woodruff, Buehler are probably the top 3 front runners for the NL Cy Young. Maybe throw Zach Wheeler in there. So it's just gonna be so many talented players in one spot. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I don't know if the Red Sox are going to make it. I think for your sake, I hope they do. For my sake, I hope they don't.
Yeah, you've got conflicted interests there.
Yeah, definitely. And if it's an Oakland Brewers World Series, I may just quit baseball.
I was gonna say that would take a lot, though. You might not be there yet.
No. I don't think Oakland's ever going to get to a World Series, and with the management that they have. They're just to not have, like, not to go off on a tangent, but to not keep Marcus Semien after what he's doing in Toronto.
Best offseason move.
Yeah, like best offseason move for Toronto. Worst offseason move for Oakland. To think that Elvis Andrus is an upgrade, or not even an upgrade, but just like, okay, we can save some money, keep Elvis Andrus, and we'll get the similar. No, you're not going to get anywhere close to the production that Marcus Semien is having.
I'll never understand
positions too.
Yeah, I'll never understand why people were so out on Semien, because I think it was 2019 when he finished 3rd in AL MVP voting, right?
I'll tell you this,
and that was his outlier year, even though he's been above average every single year. And now, I mean, you could say he's been one of the best players in the AL. It's crazy.
Yeah, so he came up, I want to say 2015. We got him from the White Sox. I was laughing with Josh about this, the Jeff Samardzija trade, that they got Jeff Samardzija from Oakland, and he's been garbage since he left. I think he had like one mediocre season with San Francisco, but we got Chris Bassett, Marcus Semien, and then Josh Phegley, who was I want to say maybe one-time All-Star. If not, he was almost an All-Star.
Yeah,
above average catcher. He just retired, I think, last offseason. But we got 3 really good pitchers, or one really good pitcher, one MVP candidate, and then a really good backup All-Star or backup catcher. And they got Jeff Samardzija, and I think one other player we threw in there too. But funny. In his first season, he led the league in errors, and just listening to, he was bad. He was so, and that's kind of like why I think that kind of sticks around him.
Yeah,
he was probably postseason, like calling shows, like you call the people and complain or whatever, like on the radio. Everyone would just complain about him. Oakland ended up hiring Ron Washington, who's just an absolute guru, to coach him, and completely turned him around. He became, I think 2 years later, he was a Gold Glove candidate. And then that same year, he was obviously 3rd in the AL MVP voting. Wow. So his career like completely turned around in Oakland, which is a reason why like fans want him to stay. Like he's like, he and I grew up like 5 minutes from each other. Like we we both grew up in the same city.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
El Cerrito, California. Yeah. So
wow. That's a great story. That's not talked about enough. That deserves to be talked about more.
Yeah, for sure. And like my sister, like we didn't go to school in that city, but my sister almost went to school with him, and he's like probably a year or 2 older than I am. So it's crazy how like we literally grew up blocks from each other, and he went to Cal Berkeley, so Bay Area kid. Wow. So that's a big reason why Oakland wanted to keep him. But of course, I will never understand why teams don't invest in their talent, like from Pittsburgh to Oakland to even Miami. Sometimes when they make trades like Gary Yelich and Stanton and all that stuff like that. So
I mean, you didn't even mention the Rays in that conversation. The reason they're not is because they're so good. And the thing is, Oakland deserves credit. Oakland is a 90+ win team every single year. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that they're better teams any given year. But they're able somehow to keep up the small market, low payroll thing. And it's just that the Rays one-up them every single year.
Yeah, and I think the Rays, they develop pitching a little bit better.
Right.
And Oakland, I think what really like messed up Oakland, and we're completely in tandem now, but what really messed up Oakland is the fact that Jesus Luzardo didn't pan out.
Yeah.
They got him expecting him to be their ace. AJ Puck was supposed to be like the 1B to the 1A of him. There was talks about who was better, who was going to be better, whatnot. AJ Puck was injured. He didn't really pitch much. He hasn't pitched much.
I was going to ask where he was. Yeah. Is he in the minors now?
No, I think he's called up.
Okay.
If not, he will be, especially with the rosters expanding.
Right.
And Chris Davis got called up today for the Oakland A, so that's one thing that makes me really happy. And
is he gonna go off?
I think he had like 10 home runs in the last like 5 games in the minors.
Wow, of course he did.
So I think, and he had a really good postseason last year. So I think there's a chance that he may be one of those kind of guys who just really makes everybody forget about how poor of the past 2 years he's had. But no, yeah. So it's crazy how teams just don't invest, and that's gonna forever like bug me. Like you see, I see the Dodgers and like they spend money, and I'm like, and the Dodgers they spend money, but they're really smart. Like their front office. I think as Farhan Azaidi came from the Dodgers, and before that he was in Oakland.
Really?
And they have and he actually went to the Dodgers right before they started winning, and he helped clean up their books and stuff because they had a bunch of dumb contracts. But no, the Dodgers are really good at what they do. They just invest, and that's something I wish other teams would do. So
totally. No, I think you could argue that the NL West has 3 of the best executives in baseball.
Yes.
Friedman, Preller, and Zaidi. Yeah, and they're all just, it's such a tooth and nail. But the flip side of that is that the Mets have a lot of money to spend, and look what position they're in right now. So it's not a
we didn't talk about them at all. Yeah, no, and Farhan, he was Billy Bean's like right hand man for a while, so he kind of learned.
I didn't know
him.
that. That's cool.
Yeah. So he took all of that with the money added to it. So like you can make really good contracts, and same thing with the Giants. They made a ton of trades last season, and that's kind of now finally panning out in this season when they're the best team in baseball and have a really really good shot to make the World Series. I think Luke Voigt just hurt himself, but I don't know if that's true or not. I think I just saw somebody post that on Twitter. Locked On Yankees, Stacey and all that. But anyway, hey, thanks for coming on. I can talk baseball forever, but I'll let you go. I'll definitely have to have you on if the Red Sox do make it, or even just to talk postseason baseball with you and try to get your co-host on too, maybe, and see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love that. Thanks again for having me on. I love talking baseball too. Super fun.
Yeah, and tell us where we can find your podcast, the name of it, and where we can find you on Twitter.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Emma_Houghton9. And the podcast is called the Did You Hear Podcast. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Did You Hear Pod.
Good. Awesome. All right. Well, you have a great rest of your night and stay safe. I know you're in the middle of a storm over there.
Thanks. I hope the thunder didn't get caught on camera. Or
I haven't heard it. I was just hoping your Wi-Fi didn't cut out.
Me too. Yeah. Thanks again, Francisco.
Yeah. Have a great night.